Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Warm welcome to everyone here and also checking in on the live stream. Thank you for taking the time to join us for the first of the Connected and Protected Speakers series. Now tonight, we welcome 3 people to the stage to speak to you about important issues surrounding ways in which platform-enabled digital technologies have become infused in our lives. We'll hear about the concrete steps they've taken to keep our children and our society safe from behaviors enabled by these technologies. And we will hear about actionable methods that push our technologies to work for the benefit of us, for human flourishing, not against us. First, we're going to hear from Ed Peisner, founder of the Organization for Social Media Safety, and Mark Berkman, who serves as the CEO of the organization. Our third speaker will be Chris Itzen, Program Administrator from LBUSD's Communication Department, and the lead policy writer for LBUSD's recently passed Board of Education Policy 5131.8, Reclaiming Attention, Limiting Distractions, and Supporting Wellness. Chris will speak about the policy in the second half of the talk tonight. My name is Lee Underwood, co-author of the Reclaiming Attention Board Policy, and I teach AP Literature right here at Millikan High School. After a long career in business, Ed Peisner founded the Organization for Social Media Safety in 2017, after his teenage son Jordan was viciously assaulted in West Hills, California. The attack was filmed and uploaded to social media by an associate of the attacker. Jordan was left with serious and lifelong injuries from the assault. Ed decided to dedicate himself to the goal of ensuring that no other family had to endure such a terrible ordeal. Ed now proudly travels the country, teaching students, parents, and educators essential social media and safety skills. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, 5 kids, 2 dogs, and a bearded dragon. As the CEO, Mark has overseen the growth of the organization into the world's preeminent consumer protection organization focused on social media. Under Mark's leadership, OFSMS has developed a state-of-the-art social media safety curriculum and has taught essential safety skills to hundreds of thousands of students, parents, and educators worldwide. Mark has also guided OFSMS's advocacy efforts, leading to the passage of groundbreaking social media safety legislation such as Jordan's Law, the nation's first law to deter social media-motivated violence. And Mark has spearheaded major partnerships with OFSMS and prestigious non-governmental organizations, including ones with DARE International, to expand access to social media safety education, and with UCLA to undertake innovative social media safety research. As a globally recognized expert in social media safety, Mark has been featured in notable publications like the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times. Mark received his Juris Doctor from Columbia Law School and his Bachelor of Arts from UC Berkeley. He lives with his wife and 2 children in Los Angeles, California. As a father of 2 girls, aged 11 and 5, the ideas we will hear about tonight flow through the conversations I have at home and with other parents. A sense of exasperated inevitability punctuates the discussion. Well, one of us parents ends up saying, I don't know what I'm gonna do, especially if all her friends have phones and social media accounts. We hope that when the time comes, we will just know what to do when the time is coming, at least in my home. And I am still unsure, I know, how I'm gonna handle the overwhelming pressure to release my daughters into the world with a phone, with the full power of the internet, seemingly irresistible, friendly AI chatbots, and apps that deliver content to the brain like a Las Vegas slot machine. As a teacher, I have asked my students to describe a version of themselves that might exist had they never been handed a phone with the full power of the internet, seemingly irresistible, friendly AI chatbots, and apps that deliver content to the brain like a Las Vegas slot machine. And I get basic variations of 2 responses. One describes a person who would have never benefited from the ability to discover new music through streaming platforms or communities of artists that move them to become better versions of themselves. But the other version the version of themselves that might exist had they never had a smartphone, is a person who would be, quote, way more observant, caring, and appreciative of the things in the world that they take for granted. They say that this person, would pay attention to what matters more and be less anxious about everything. They talk about a version of themselves as a student who would be doing better than what they have allowed of their current selves. And I think this dichotomy gets at the heart of the conversation tonight. How can we coexist with these technologies in ways that empower us and our children to be the best versions of themselves, to encourage self-regulation rather than render us helpless to resist, and to be resilient and steadfast advocates for humanity, even as we continue to use these technologies? Without further ado, I am so pleased to welcome Ed Peisner and Mark Berkman.
Turn this on. Oh. Just going to steal that clicker.
While Ed's getting that, let me just thank everyone who came and who's watching on Zoom. Thank you to Long Beach Unified for having us. I could say we presented all over the world at panels, and we've never had snacks put out for us, I think, once. So thank you for that hospitality as well. I'll turn over to Ed.
Thank you. Turn that off. I don't want to feedback on anybody. Thank you again for the snacks, for having us here. So I'm just going to go through part of our presentation here. Again, my name is Ed Peisner. I'm the founder of the Organization for Social Media Safety. And as it says right up here on the screen, we are the leading consumer protection organization focused exclusively on social media safety. We protect against all the harms and risks that are associated with social media. We're not going to go through all of them tonight, but some of them, cyberbullying, sextortion, I just lost that whole list because it's so long. But again, we're not going to go over all of these tonight. We are backed by a world-class board of directors, so we have over 20 members on our board of directors, as well as our advisory council. We're right now on our board of directors, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, leading physicians, pediatricians, and technologists, all of whom together keep us at the forefront of global expertise when it comes to social media safety. By the way, the consumer protection-oriented approach to our work, which it says here, is really just a fancy way in the nonprofit world of saying we've got more than one department to keep us safe on social media safety, on social media. So those departments are our technology department, where we work on apps and software to prevent any and all harms when it comes to social media. We have an advocacy department. I apologize for my CEO's picture right there, but we have an advocacy department where we work at state level and federal levels, enhancing public policy when it comes to social media. I will apologize in advance for this picture. But we do education work. We, again, travel across the country educating students and parents and administrators and faculty against all the harms associated with social media. We do work with the press, making sure that any stories they have regarding social media include safety tips and accurate information. We also have a research department where we work by collecting data from our presentations because they're all interactive, and we work with the UCLA School of Education on research behind the dangers and harms and risks around social media. That said, I'm going to just share my story, and I know they mentioned it briefly, but I'm just going to share the story behind our organization. So at the time, this is December 2nd, 2016, my son Jordan was in the middle of 9th grade in West Hills, California, El Camino High School, and he was walking home from school this particular afternoon like any other typical afternoon. This afternoon, he stopped with his friends at a restaurant near my house. He was just hanging outside, minding his own business with his friends, when a teen from another school walked up behind Jordan and punched him as hard as he could because of a challenge he had received on social media. This later became known as the knockout challenge or the punch challenge. Jordan was knocked unconscious, left with a traumatic brain injury, airlifted and sent to Children's Hospital, where he spent 7 days in the ICU. He did recover from this injury, although it left permanent damage and emotional scarring. The part that led me to form an organization about social media safety, the attacker's best friend was filming the entire incident. They knew when it was going to happen, where it was going to happen, and instead of intervening, they were waiting for it to happen, and they had their camera out, and they filmed the whole thing. And then, of course, they took the video, and they shared the video on social media, where it went viral quickly. Hundreds of thousands of views on this video, and everybody watching my son's worst moment as entertainment. And that's why I reached out to my assembly member in my area, because I wanted to do something about that moment, about what we now call social media motivated violence. And the chief of staff at the time had called me back and told me, let's work together to see what you're talking about. And I'm going to sort of turn it over to Mark here, because Mark at the time was the chief of staff in my assembly member's office. That's when we met, and Mark actually had told me when I called, he'd already seen the video within hours of it happening, because that's, again, the viral nature. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark so he can kind of lead us on the development of our organization.
So, middle button. Did I break it? So, we did some research in our office, and this is just to track time. This is back in 2016 here. So we did some research in our office, and it turns out that what we now call social media motivated violence, or these attacks committed for the purpose of filming them and sharing them on social media to get those likes, those shares, and those views, or what our kids today will call clout. Those types of videos were doubling every single year since the birth of major social media around 2006. And so we could find a few of those incidents back in 2006, and you fast forward to 2016, 2017, we found thousands and thousands of these videos being viewed by literally millions, many of those teens and even tweens, creating a really disturbing cycle here. And so what we did in California, as was mentioned in the intro, is we passed a law called Jordan's Law, which was the first law in the country to target social media motivated violence. And what it does is it makes clear that anyone who conspires with an attacker to film a violent crime will be liable as an accomplice and subject to an enhanced or a longer sentence. Now, what we passed this law for was so that it can serve as a teaching tool to all the students that we speak to across California and across the country as well. And we found that to be very effective over the last near decade we've been doing this. Here's the thing with social media motivated violence. It grew up in plain sight. And so as I said, thousands and thousands of videos, some very tragically ending in a fatality, being viewed by millions. And what this was doing was creating a cycle of normalization in the teens watching this type of content. And it has continued to do that to this day. These videos are still out there by the thousands. The more teens watch them, the more it normalizes it and the more expansion we've seen in this harm. We have found that in the 5th grade, about 85% of 5th graders have seen this type of violence. So I want to be clear as we talk, and we're just kind of doing a very abridged version of kind of our general presentation. So we don't have time tonight, or the ability tonight to do our full presentation. But when we talk about social media safety, understanding that these harms are out there now, that they are affecting our children by the millions, and they're still not very well understood, and there is a lot of them. And so despite the recent press and the recent attention on social media safety, we're still missing the focus here, and we're not fully understanding how severe these harms are. You want to do?
Yeah, I could run it. So one of the things, again, I talk to students all over the country, I talk to parents. One of the things that we try to instill in our kids is what happens when they come across a danger. First of all, it's really important, as Marcia said, we have to make sure that they see the danger, they know what the danger is. Put a title to it, if you will. So social media motivated violence, it wasn't really, I want to say we coined that phrase, unfortunately, after what happened in Jordan. But to be able to recognize a harm or a danger, and then give our kids something to do, an interaction to do once they come across that danger. So block and report is a tactic that we want all kids to do, all parents, all adults. all of us to do, really almost require our children to do. And I'm going to break it down. It's really simple. Block means that anytime your child or you or a student comes across a harm, let's say like social media motivated violence, a video of somebody getting hurt, they should block the person, the offending user who sent them the video or shared it on their platform or posted it or gave them access to it. They block that person from their platform. So again, they're kind of putting a shield up to their brain so they're not absorbing that. And depending on the age of the child, I'm just going to throw this out there, you could also hide somebody from the platform, because sometimes when you block somebody, depending on the age of the student, when they come back to school, that might create a little bit of conflict, because the student might say, did you block me from your platform? And that could be some unnecessary conflict. So you do have the ability to hide. What we're doing is we're instilling this block and or hide instruction in their brain so that they're automatically repelling that content. And then reporting it, there's actually two features reporting. Number one, to a trusted adult. For my own instance, I will tell you this. Kids that knew this was going to happen after school showed up with their phones ready to record it, and no one reported it to an adult in advance. We know now, obviously, you report that to an adult in advance. The adult could then show up and hopefully prevent that from happening. That's not what happened in my son's case. They all showed up with phones ready to record. So reporting to an adult in advance could then get that other person out of trouble. What I like to tell the kids is it's not trying to get somebody in trouble, it's trying to get somebody out of trouble. But also reporting it to the platform so that the platform could follow their rules and pull the video down and get it removed, thus help cleaning it up and preventing it from going viral, as in my son's case. They might not pull the video down every time. That might be something that remains up there, unfortunately, like my son's video, which has been pulled down and then pops back up because somebody else has it on their phone and they could reload it at some. But we want to instill this as a necessary tool in their brains to do automatically. What we want is to create a habit of blocking and reporting. So again, it bolsters their mental defenses against what Mark said, that normalization of the violence. So if block and report becomes a habit, every time they come across social media motivated violence, they know, wait, I'm supposed to block this and then I'm going to report it. And again, even if the platform doesn't take the video down, we still report it to the platform. We're going through that process to the end so that we're repelling the content. What we want is our children to say to themselves automatically, this content doesn't comply with the values my family set. I'm going to block and report this anytime I come across any of the other harms. But when I come across social media motivated violence, if I ever come across Jordan's video, I'm blocking and reporting that because I'm helping the person in the video. I'm not going to watch it and try to benefit off of their worst moment. So that's block and report. Again, it's something that we talk about a lot during the dangers that we go through with the kids so that they have something to do instead of just, unfortunately, mindlessly scrolling by and watching the next one and the next one and the next one.
And I'll add, because this is actually locally relevant. So we worked on, you mentioned that platforms are getting, they're not always taking content down that poses a real threat to children. We worked with Assemblymember Josh Lowenthal, who represents this area actually, so this is coincidentally bringing this up, on new legislation. This is applicable to the principals in the schools of this district and licensed mental health professionals, including a lot of school counselors. If you see a piece of content that poses a risk to a child, all the harms that we don't have time to cover tonight, cyberbullying, sexting, sextortion, drug trafficking, very long list, that now principals and these licensed mental health professionals will be able to make an expedited report to social media platforms. They will have to review that content in either 72 or 24 hours. The platforms will have to review it. In severe cases, they will have to review it with a human. And so we are working on this issue of dangerous content not getting taken down. But I do want to point that out, and thank you to Assemblymember Lowenthal for working with us on that one.
Just some of the numbers so you can see how pervasive this has become. Again, social media. This is just recently being updated, so more than 5.1 billion people on social media worldwide. Obviously, there's about 8.2 billion people on the planet, so this has become really a communications revolution, which is what they said it was going to be many years ago. We kind of talked about it way back in the day, like this is going to take over. And again, right now we're at 5.1 billion. 70% of teens say they use social media every day. And what we are seeing is teens are online an average of about 9 hours a day. Tweens, it's about 6. And between 3 and 4 hours of that time is strictly dedicated to social media. And just for the purposes of this conversation really quickly, the definition we use of social media is any app or platform that allows you to connect and share content with another user that you identify on that platform. So we're not talking about just one app or one platform. There's many. We're including in this online gaming, where you could chat in an open chat or with a headset on. You're talking about things like Snapchat and WhatsApp and TikTok, things like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, Discord. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So very comprehensive definition here. We're including many different moving targets when it comes to social media. So the number of 3 to 4 hours a day strictly on social media, that's a huge number.
That's just the median. I mean, we find
Yeah.
about 30% at 7+ hours, so extensive amount of time.
The dangers. At the beginning, I said there's a lot of dangers on social media, and they're flooding through my brain, but I'm going to share some of them with you on this screen. I'll have you know these aren't all of them, but I just want you to understand that excessive time on social media, when you're coming across dangers like you're about to see, this is what we're up against right now. And I'll give you a second to take a look at that. And just to add in here, because we don't really bring it up yet, but artificial intelligence, AI, that's going to exacerbate a lot of what you see on the screen right now. So the dangers are real, the dangers exist. And again, the best way to avoid a danger is understanding that the danger exists, knowing what the danger is so you could avoid it. That is the way that you could avoid dangers, is by understanding what it is so that you know what to do if you encounter that. That said, come on, Mark.
All right, so we're talking about social media safety now before we get into our questions, but this is really important 2 slides here that we want to leave you with as a takeaway kind of in the mini presentation part of this evening. So there are 2 ways to protect our children from social media related threats and other threats in general, right? First one is what we call buckling the seatbelt. So that is everything that we do as parents to help increase the chances that our children are not going to come across a certain harm or threat, or if they do come across it, that we are lessening the amount of harm that they suffer. So that's called preemptive safety, kind of preempt the protection there. And then we have what we call breaking the glass. So that's everything that we should do as a parent after our child has come across a harm to help lessen the amount of harm that they suffer. We have to think of both as parents when we think about social media safety. So I want to dive into that buckling the seatbelt piece, because this is crucially important. And what we realized when we started developing our curriculum a number of years ago now is that us parents who did not grow up with social media ourselves, we are rightfully confused as to how to protect our children, right? So we go to other parents, we ask for some tips, here and there. We maybe search on the internet and get a one-off tip. We even go to a talk and maybe get some tips thrown at us. And kind of as busy as we are on parents, and as quick as social media changes, and as our children are digital natives and become immersed in this social media world, it gets really hard to implement one-off tips as we get them. And so what we realized is that us parents need a system for this preemptive safety piece of it. We need to approach it as a system. This is how preemptive safety, or buckling the seatbelt, really works, right? When you take a flight, for example, your pilot has a checklist organized by experts based on experience that they can go through ahead of time, one by one, and that's how they ensure that you're going to have a safe flight. And so we developed a similar approach when it comes to social media for parents. And that approach has 3 categories of interventions that we want every parent to think about certainly when your child first enters this world of social media, definitely if your child is already on it. And so these categories which you see here, first one is what we call calibrating the settings, or making sure that the safety settings on your child's device, so their phones, their iPads, computers, making sure those settings are set to the correct level for the child. Also, all of the apps that you're allowing them to download, including the ability for you to restrict their options of what they can download without your permission. That's a big one there. And I wish we had time to teach that, but so calibrating the settings is a very important piece of this full system here that unfortunately a lot of people skip over. So we want to highlight that. Second one is our social media rules in our family. So everything that you want your child to do whenever they go on social media or whenever they come across a certain situation on social media. So those are really important. And lastly, I would say most importantly, and especially as our children get older, these other two pieces get less important as they get older, less effective, I should say, and the conversations, grow in importance through the end of high school. So the conversations, we got two goals there, as Ed was mentioning earlier. First is to make our children aware of the various dangers that they can encounter on social media. And again, unfortunately, we don't have time to go through even the highlights of those tonight, but understanding what those dangers are yourself as a parent are crucial to having those conversations so that our children understand how these harms work in the world of social media, how they harm, so that they can protect themselves. Our second reason for those conversations is to instill the necessary principles and values so that our children can react in the safest way, in accord with their own family values when they come across these harms. For example, research, and in our work we have found very consistently that teens and even tweens will not respond to a harm like sexual harassment because they do not understand what it is or what it looks like on social media, that it can be very dangerous, and that it does not conform to family and community values. And so having that conversation can make all the difference in the world in terms of safety. So to make this system comprehensive and useful, to make it a system for parents, we have a full checklist of conversations that you can have with your children that is available for free on our website, socialmediasafety.org. We have a full template of rules. We have a full tutorial of how to calibrate those settings as well. And as we get into some of your schools, hopefully we will also be doing this type of education with parents in more depth, kind of highlighting these categories of interventions. So I just covered this. With that, please feel free to email Ed with any questions. Of course, you can find our email on our website as well. So there's our website. This QR code links to our newsletter as well. I think we stayed on time here mostly, and we can jump to questions here.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, we are opening this up to anyone that has questions. We have also received questions from our online community as well, which we can also go into. But if anybody in here has a question directed towards our guests, I will come and bring the microphone to you, and you can ask your question to them. They're full of knowledge about all of this. If there is not, then I will also look into the questions that were received online.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming out. This is very important to me as well. My question is, our young people and all of us, we're just so in our phones. And I'm used to analog, I'm Gen X. So it doesn't mean as much to me. What are some replacement behaviors that we have that you've kind of come across? Because I think that with any addiction, right, if we have something else to do, it might be, that might help with us kind of putting these devices in perspective.
That's an excellent question. Are you an educator? Yeah. Replacement behaviors, I love it. It's such an important concept that we need to think about both in our schools and in our homes. And the issue, as she mentioned, is that social media, addiction is a complicated word scientifically and clinically, right? But certainly we're seeing a bad habit when it comes to social media. And one of the reasons we believe that we're seeing this huge jump in anxiety, depression, and self-harm that by a number of research studies is correlated to what we would call excessive social media use, is that social media is displacing activities that are significantly more beneficial and fulfilling. And so you asked about what some of those are, right? Playing outside, especially for elementary and middle school set, that is now replaced with hours of this, right? In 5th and 6th grade, we're finding, again, on average, about 4 to 5 hours a day of daily use. And so the displacement is very concerning. We would look at it like you have to, as caregivers in the home and in the school, help the students break this habit or not start it in the first place, so that they go and naturally go back to the activities that we were doing growing up. And so things like ensuring in your household that you are setting, I talked about calibrating the settings, that you're setting the settings on your child's devices to limit the amount of time that they're on it to what you consider a healthy amount of time in your home. That way, by the way, you don't need to stand over their shoulder. You don't need to yank the devices out of their hands. It's great for reducing that conflict. When they hit that amount of time, they are locked out, and they will naturally go, do the things that we want them to do, read a book, play outside, practice an instrument, do their chores, do their homework, go to sleep on time, by the way, which is a huge one. So setting those settings, setting a time at least, and this is dependent on age, right? Some of our younger kids we don't want at all, so this is dependent on age, but setting a day every week where our children are not going to be on devices. Ed loves a tech-free Tuesday, right, where we set that reminds them again that there are these other activities that they can be doing. There are other ways to socialize. We work with one school where there was an entire 6th grade class that got their kids old-fashioned landlines to call each other together, which is a fantastic idea. So that day every week, hopefully a week every month or two, and during the summer, a whole month, to remind them again that there are other activities and help break the habitual use of social media. And then, of course, and when we were talking about replacement activities, doing activities with them as a caregiver every now and then to remind them there are fun things to do off-screen. Those experiences have meaning. Those are the experiences that they're going to remember. We ask the teens we teach, the teens we work with across the country all the time, do you remember the 4 hours of TikTok that you scrolled through last week? Can you name one video that you saw there? They don't remember it. It is a complete and total waste of time for them. So that is such an important question. We could talk on that one for an hour at least. And there's more, of course, when we do our full education. But those are kind of, I think, the highlights there. Did I miss anything?
No, I'll just add this because I was at a school, again, I'm all over the country, but I was at a school somewhere and I was ending up my presentation with the students, and one of the students had asked me very politely, what am I supposed to do if I put my phone away for that hour or those 2 hours? And I sort of tilted my head because I didn't understand the question. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, could you recommend something for me to do? So to Mark's point, we have to help them get back into the habit of just being a child, putting that device away, giving them ideas, things to do. They actually don't know what to do. They are using it to replace that rewarding, healthy, fulfilling activity. So helping them. And as a parent, as an educator, obviously we want to model that same behavior. So we can't tell them, put your phone down, you've been on it long enough, and then you're sitting there for hours a day on the phone. It's really modeling that behavior that we're not going to be habitually using that device. So that's the one that just popped in my head.
The one, and last thing I would highlight on this question is what the research tells us in terms of the safety here, is that there is a link, a correlation, association, as I mentioned at the beginning, but I should give you the actual time here, between excessive social media use and increases in anxiety, depression, and self-harm. The research kind of lands between 3 hours plus or 5 hours plus of daily social media use, or daily social media use in and of itself. And as I told you, the average that, and Ed told you, the average we find is 3 to 5 hours in communities across the country. And so our students are already over that time. So it's a really important question for our children's mental health. So thank you for that.
See if I'm too close, what's gonna, okay, no, we're good sound-wise. I actually studied, largely, let me move over here, cyberbullying in my undergrad I have an English Right Comp degree. And since now I have a sophomore here and a 12-year-old son, and I have been going, my kids don't have phones, first of all. Let's start there. 16 and under, smartphones are not allowed in my house, period. And I found out that a neighbor of mine who was 13 was showing my son, I believe it's hentai, this porn of various levels, and dodging my supervision and things all around. And what concerns me is that my kids are not allowed on social media until 16 and under. Jonathan Haidt has become my absolute new obsession. If you guys have not read his book, it is absolutely phenomenal, and every parent should. I wish there were more here. What I found out is my daughter we transferred, I've recently moved back to Long Beach, I've never been happier, but we were in Huntington, and she was at Huntington Beach High School, where they give the students their own Chromebook, and she was on everything. And I didn't know this until she was acting odd and would slam it shut every time I'd come in her room, and I was like, I'm glad you're such a bad liar, but okay, now I've got a reason to snoop. I did, and I found a lot. Literally some of my greatest fears, I'll just say, I'm glad face wasn't in certain pictures. And it's become to the point where I'm like, how can we? I've had the conversations. We've watched Sounds of Freedom with both mine, because my son's like, oh, well, I'm a boy, I'm fine. No, you're not. So I've done all these things, and even still, it's like kids are it's so addicted. They see everybody else doing it. I'm so glad that LA Unified has blocked the cell phones, and that's, I think, trickling down. We've got to have, I think all AI and social media needs to be phones need to be completely blocked out of everything college and below. I guess I'm at a loss of what else we can do, because it's so addictive. It's what everyone's doing. It's like, even when I've had these conversations, my daughter still went and did it. I'm like, I'm honestly at a loss. I'm like, I don't even know what else to do. I've showed her about Leslie Cody, Megan Meyer, Aubrey Wyatt. I mean, literally, I've like gone into it to like the nth degree. I'm like, well, crap, what else do I do?
Yeah, well, I think we definitely appreciate the challenge here, and there's no silver bullet to social media safety. There's no one thing that's going to completely eliminate all the risk. What we're trying to do here is mitigate the risk as much as we can as caregivers. You made a few points there. So to your broader point, this is a battle that has to happen beyond the individual family's home, right? That's why we have the structure that we do as a nonprofit organization. So we are in Congress, we are in Sacramento, working on laws to hold the social media platforms accountable, to change some of the policies that they have that are causing harm and taking that ability away from parents to keep our children safe. So we're doing that on the advocacy side. We are doing the research to uncover the trends and the new harms, to better learn how we can improve curriculum globally on social media safety. We are working on safety software technology, which Ed touched on at the beginning. We don't have time to teach today, but safety software, and again, back to the calibrating the setting. Well, let me finish my point. And the education piece, of course, across the board. Safety software is a critical component of that calibrating the settings piece. So setting up our filters on our routers, and I know that kind of there are devices that our kids will access that are unmanaged. They will access devices from friends and activities as well. The ones in our home, there is software where we can provide some level of filtering on websites. There is safety software like Bark and Bright Canary that can send us alerts, even life-saving alerts, I would say, when dangerous content comes across a child's social media account. So that's Bark, B-A-R-K, and Bright Canary. We really recommend those as options as well. We've seen it on the ground save lives. One is probably enough for us to make a recommendation after we vet the data security procedures internally, and we have with those options. But we have seen many children protected from those pieces of software. So it can protect from a broad range of harms, cyberbullying, sexually explicit content, other content like that. We are legislating in Congress a bill that we developed called Sammy's Law, and that would require all social media, all big social media platforms to give parents the choice of using this safety software like Bark and Bright Canary, and we're hopeful we're going to be able to pass that this Congress. This is also a matter of working with our communities as well, and so there is something that we call the lose-lose trade-off, and especially that elementary school set, early middle school, we find again and again that despite the increased awareness of the dangers of social media, what you find almost without exception is you get a few kids in that 4th grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade on platforms like Snapchat or TikTok, and these are ages where the platforms themselves say it's too dangerous. But they get on, and pretty soon you have most of the class on these platforms. Why? Because social media is social. And these are the platforms that kids are using, so the way the kids are using to maintain their relationships, to strengthen their friendships, to measure their friendships with snap streaks, which is a whole nother lesson there. And so you have this horrible choice as a parent of maximizing safety on the one hand, or putting your child at what is a real, and we need to be honest about this, what is a real social detriment? And this is what we call the lose-lose trade-off here, and it's the reason why we're seeing kind of most 5th graders, about 90% actually, on social media at an age that's just way too young, and that goes below that. Our education starts at 5th grade, so that's what we have numbers for. One way to combat that lose-lose trade-off is working as a school community together to get on the same page so that you're not trying to toe the line alone with your child when everyone else is on social media. This is something we facilitate with school communities. This is something school communities can do together. You know, we've seen kind of grades break off and do their own thing in parent groups, and that makes a huge difference because the more we can hold off there, the safer our kids are going to be from some of these harms. So that's a big one as well. The last point I'll make in terms of this frustration of what parents can do is those social media safety rules, and having those actually written and posted in your house. And we have a template, and you can conform that to what you want to do with your family. But what's important there, one, besides making it very explicit, is the enforcement of those rules. And so your child knows. Obviously, we're doing this in a way where we want to have an open door where they come to us with issues, and we want that conversation happening. But we also want some level of deterrence for hacking around our safety settings, and violating what are very clear rules meant to protect our family, our children. And so the best practice when our children violate our family's rules based on the evidence is that the consequence is related in nature to the violation. So we're not giving a consequence for that's something that's not targeted at how our child broke our rules. So related in nature and proportional in severity to the violation of the rule. That's really hard, as you all the parents out there listening, it's really hard in real life with the rules that we have with our kids. When it comes to our social media rules, it's actually not that hard. What we should be doing when our children violate those rules is that they lose access either to their device or social media, so related in nature, they violate the social media rules, they lose access to the device for a proportional amount of time to that violation. And that's really important because if we can do that consistently, the research is very clear that it does modify our kids' behavior. They will behave in a safer way. It is that extra deterrence from working around our safety software, our router settings, and getting to that other stuff. It's deterrence for, when our kids are doing something outside of our home that they know that this is going to be the consequence. Again, you have to know your own child, and we want this done in a way where we're still encouraging an open door policy and having those conversations, which also can be life-saving in and of themselves, but we find that these rules are very important for safety. That was a long answer, I'm sorry.
That was a long answer. I'm just going to add, you're not alone. We're here. I became an accidental advocate when Jordan got hurt. You're not alone. So reach out to us, use our information. Fantastic. I just want to make sure everybody knows they're not alone, even the people listening at home too. So.
You're also not alone in dealing with it. I mean, I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. So this is an issue that parents are grappling with across the country, and it is hard, and parents are not being heard, and that is our job, too, to bring that to the higher levels and make change here beyond what you can do in your home. Yeah, for those online, I don't know if that got picked up, but she mentioned with the amount of time and the responsibilities that parents have, this is really hard, and we get that. We are trying to make it easier for parents. So we're able to teach parents and students what we're capable of doing in the home now, which we believe really does mitigate a lot of risk. But there are parents that just don't have the time to fully kind of embrace our full system, right? And we are working hard to give every parent in this country, every caregiver in this country, the ability to fully protect their child. This is a process that is very much ongoing.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question, honor some of the questions that came in online. We have time for one or two more questions here.
What is our cutoff here, so I don't speak too?
I think we're at about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this question is, how long is the maximum time we should expose our daughter to YouTube kid videos in the TV or the phone?
It's a good question. YouTube Kids is such a better option for younger children than full YouTube, and we see a lot of elementary school students on full YouTube. So first of all, remember, parents that are listening here, YouTube is social media. YouTube comes with a number of risks. YouTube has caused a good amount of harm to children, so we need to be aware of that. YouTube Kids is social media, but kind of more moderated and with less harm and without the comment section, which is particularly troubling. There's no, we are very evidence-based. So I don't have a study to tell you kind of X hours on YouTube Kids, to be clear. What I would go back to is what we were talking about earlier on the studies that show when we start hitting issues on mental health at 3 to 5 hours a day. That's a lot of time per day, especially for an elementary school student to be on YouTube Kids. And so likely the optimal there is a lot lower. Our concern with YouTube Kids and some of the other social media platforms that are marketing to children as being child safe, and that's probably a 30-minute conversation. We have concerns with those, is habituating them, creating this bad habit of social media use at a younger age. And so I would say if you can really limit that time, if you can kind of make sure that it's not every day of the week, that you are breaking up days, if you start noticing issues that they are displacing other fulfilling activities that we talked about before, that is your sign to take a break from YouTube Kids and put down the device for a period of time till you start seeing them kind of get into the other habits. I think our preference is probably kind of through 13, you know, a limited amount of time. And remember, even on YouTube Kids, there is some dangerous content that has snuck through those filters. It's not human moderated, it is AI moderated on YouTube Kids, so we got to be aware of that as well. Did I miss anything? All right.
Okay, and then we have one more question here. This is, what is the proper age to think about buying an iPad or a phone for your kids?
So that's a good question. So there is some evidence on that question. We don't have a firm age, though, because there's not enough for us to say X age. The bigger concern is the smartphone. And there have now been some very credible, very large studies. And I would highlight one from an organization called Sapien Labs that showed that for every year from the age of 19 down to the age of 6, for every year earlier that a child gets a smartphone, there is a statistically significant increase in outcomes of anxiety, depression, self-harm, and a few other negative mental health outcome metrics. That's every year. So 19 on down to 6. It doesn't stop magically at 13 or 14. It is every year. So there is a bigger correlation for girls. So girls appear to be more susceptible to these negative mental health outcomes, to be clear. Still there for boys, but larger for girls, so we need to be aware of that. So as a parent, you have to make this very challenging judgment call of when you want to have your child acquire that smartphone. We want you to do that in an educated way. We are playing off this lose-lose trade-off again, so there is no research on the other side of that equation for certain situations that we find our kids in. You know, every other child in their group has the phone. That can lead to some social exclusion or cyberbullying. We're aware of that, and so only you as the parent, as the caregiver, are going to be able to make the best choice for your child. We just want you to do that with the information at your fingertips. We also want to try to make that easier for you on the lose-lose side by breaking up that trade-off and helping kind of push that age of getting a smartphone off kind of as late as we can to the least to middle school. And I say that because we see kind of 4th through 6th grade kind of being where we see kind of most of the children getting smartphones. The iPad, there's not much research in terms of the acquisition on the iPad or the tablet, I should say, in general. We don't necessarily think that there's a higher risk on the tablet than a laptop per se, and I will go back to calibrating the settings there, that you can set those time limits on the device. You want to definitely make sure you have their filters on. Ideally for our younger set, they're using it in a public area of the house. And if you get the time settings on, you know, our biggest concern becomes that amount of time that they're on. So if you can get the time settings on the tablet and they're using it for what you believe to be a healthy amount of time, which is certainly under 3 hours a day, that's going to mitigate a good bit of the risk there. And you, of course, can have a tablet without enabling social media on it, right? So that you're just allowing apps that, and internet access that is safe for your child's developmental age. And so we hear a lot, you know, my child needs a phone. We have kind of single parent family or multi-home family situation or some sort of circumstance where they need access. There are safety phones out there. A light phone, gab phone, bark phone exists as well, where you can just have the child have access to call you, and they don't have broader, you know, they don't have the world of the internet at their fingertips with the phone. That eliminates the risk of these devices at the end of the day.
It's a phone. It's a phone, which is what we keep calling it, but I would highly recommend that for the younger kids.
If you have to do that.
Well, I just want to say thank you for making the time to come out here. Our engaged audience that we have here, those of you looking or watching online, this has been a real important conversation to have, has been coming for a long time, and I think we benefit all from your presence here. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much for having us, really.
Thank you. Can we just do a round of applause for our guests here? Yeah, thank you. Now, coming on right after this, having seen the presentation, having heard that, we do have Mr. Chris Itzen, who is going to be working through the ideas related to the social media policy that has just been passed in this district, and ways in which we are going to see a lot of the issues that came from this conversation, some of the guardrails and restrictions even enacted across our district. So I am going to say thank you so much, and we will see you hopefully soon. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Itzen to come out on stage. Mr. Itzen, Chris Itzen, is the program administrator for the communications department here at Long Beach Unified School District. And he is the co-writer, lead writer of the LBUSD policy on social media safety here that was passed on September 3rd. And he will be walking us through some of the finer points of this policy.
This thing's on. Hear me? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know there's a big Dodgers game tonight and probably a bunch of other stuff going on, so thanks for braving it out on a Monday. We have some really great stuff to share with you, and also to those that are watching at home. You know, there's this quote that I really, really love by Cheryl Turkle, who is an MIT professor, where she says, "We're forever elsewhere." And really talking, oh, give me a second. Okay, so talking about just the distractions, right, that these things have every day, and it's so constant for it. You know, and I'm sorry, I know this is the middle of the presentation. Hold on, I gotta check my work phone there real quick. So we're constantly distracted. We're always on our screens. We're looking down. We're not paying attention to what's going on. You know what? I got a better idea. I'm going to turn these off, and I'm going to put them away in my backpack. So as the program administrator in communications, I have the job of overseeing all of social media for the Long Beach Unified School District, our live streaming, our video production, our storytelling, which is something that I absolutely love to do. But before that, I was a teacher, and so my heart will always go back to the classroom and and always thinking about the two most fundamental parts of education are, one, keeping our children safe, whether it's physically, emotionally, anytime they're in our care, and then also ensuring that they learn and that they're successful. And often, while technology is great, the technology we have can be problematic for that. And we're seeing that get worse and worse and worse, right? And listening to Ed and Mark talking only just starting to scratch the surface of the impact of that. But also, like everyone else who's been up here today, I'm a parent of a young child in the Long Beach Unified School District. So for me, this is not just my job. I'm not just a stuffy administrator in a jacket. I'm somebody who cares deeply because I have a ton of skin in the game. It matters what happens to my child. It matters what happens to your child. And so I think about the world our kids are stepping into and how it looks completely different from the world I grew up in. I just turned 45 in September. I remember no internet. I remember not having a phone. I remember when I got a pager. I remember, but it was cool. It was white. It was this cool little pager, and you'd type into it so people could reach out to you, but then you had to go to the pay phone to use it. And then when I got my flip phone, and then eventually smartphones much later in life. But the reality of where I grew up was so different. And I think for many of us, middle school, we remember passing notes, using the landline phone. I was sharing with some students the other day that I've been married for 23 years. And I remember having to call, my wife and I started dating, and we were in high school, and I remember having to call her home and talk to her father, who maybe didn't like me very much, and I'd have to say, hello, sir, I'd like to speak to your daughter at 7 o'clock. I wasn't calling at 10 or 11 at night. It wasn't an unrestricted phone that we could contact each other all the time. It was such a different reality. And in that, for our kids now, it's group chats, TikTok, instant notifications, all before they fully develop the skills to manage it. Any of you know basic science, we have this thing called the prefrontal cortex in the front of our brain that grows. Some people debate from 25 till about 28 years old now, they're saying. And usually biological males, we take a little bit longer. And in that, the kids are getting impacted with all of this while that whole part of their brain's not growing. And that part of their brain is their executive function and their emotions and their impulse control. And so many important parts of their human development are being scrambled by these technologies. And now, it's not all bad. I would be a hypocrite to stand up before you as the person who oversees social media and some technology in this district and say it's all evil. I think often the bad does outweigh the good, but in reality, there are positive pieces. I think about all the time the access to information our kids have is more than anybody has ever had in human history. My wife wanted a shed built in the backyard. She's an artist, and she wanted her own place to do art. So I've taken over the garage with all of my hobbies. And so we got this shed, and I had some guys come over, and they put it all together for me, and then I realized it didn't have a roof on top of it, just a piece of wood. And I knew when it was going to rain soon that obviously it was going to leak and swell, and it was going to ruin it. So I had to figure out how to build a roof. And I didn't have any more money to pay the guys to come back and do it. I had to figure it out by myself. And so I share this story with students when I go out and talk to them, and of course, when I say, how did I figure it out? They say, YouTube, right? I jumped on YouTube, I found 350 different versions of how to do it, how to get the supplies, and boom, I built a roof. And it was a couple of years ago, and you remember we had that really bad El Nino and rain, finally kind of came out of the drought, and in that, it didn't leak, and it works perfectly fine now. And so now I know how to build a roof. And it's really awesome, right, that we have that technology. And when I think of our kids, I think of how it's completely changed education. It's open doors. It's even open access from an equity standpoint that kids can communicate more effectively. They can have the tools they need. There are certain digital tools for like students with disabilities that it actually supports them. And so it does have good. And on top of it, even if I wanted in my heart of hearts to say, no more social media, no more technology, it's all gone, that's just not going to happen. So as our first speakers, as Mark and Ed were talking about it, right, there are guardrails, there are things that we have to think about, and then we need to build processes to keep our kids safe because this is still coming and it's only getting worse. And at the same time, we're experiencing another side of that story. And so they talked about some of the darker side of it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Smartphones and social media are negatively impacting our kids. Addiction and distraction by design. They're made to do that, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Lower academic performance on a global level. All major nations are seeing lower academic performance because of these technologies. Cyberbullying and violence are out of control. I'm one of the people that has to monitor cyberbullying for this district, and it is disheartening and exhausting how horrible it is. And there's barely anything we can do about it because these tech companies, even the one that's broadcasting this for on live stream right now, is doing almost nothing to help us. It got way worse after the pandemic. In 2019, I could have got an account taken down on Instagram by blocking and reporting, boom, it'd be done in less than 8 hours. Now the fun little algorithm sends me a message that says, this doesn't hurt our community guidelines, so it gets to stay up because an algorithm decided it, not a human being. And we have an educational partnership with Instagram where they say, we'll expedite and help you. Nothing happens. It's also causing a mental health crisis. Our children are not okay. We were seeing this from 2015, as Jonathan Haidt talks about, then it got way worse in 2020 when our kids had to be stuck on screens. And it did for a lot of us as well. I'm sure you probably have had some kind of impact from us having to be locked down and stuck on screens all the time. And so do we really know what's going on? Like I said, I've been working in social media formally in this job for almost 7 years. Years before that, I did that some consulting, and I worked for some of our schools doing social media, and I thought I had a good handle on this and a good bead. But I found out a lot in the last 18 months while we were doing the research to develop this policy. So I'm going to ask you to yell out if you can. I know it's kind of quiet in here, but if I'm the president of CEO of Toyota Motor Corp, what's my product? What do I make? I make cars. You know what it is? It's there. If I work for a social media company and own it, what's my product? Which people? We are. You're absolutely right. We are the product. Because social media doesn't actually make anything. They give us the opportunity to put content, yes, but really it's about our eyeballs. It's about us staring at that screen as long as we possibly can, designed for addiction. The shareholders need more money. They need more views to make that money. And this is a huge slide. It's a lot of text, but just so it's up for the recording, the longer you stay on the app, the more ads they can show you. Companies are spending billions because they want our attention captured. They're tracking every click, every like, every time we swipe, how long we stay on something, because they want to know exactly how long we're on there so they can figure out how to make it even more addictive. The algorithm is feeding us content that starts sometimes emotional, sometimes it's surprising, sometimes it's something we love, so it hooks us, but a lot of times nowadays it's stuff that makes us mad, because being mad is really addictive. YouTube is terrible about this. And so they're jamming that stuff down into our faces, on our screens, so that we are more and more and more addicted. So imagine what that's doing to our kids. It's the business model. It is not there for content creators to put art out into the world. That sounds great, and it feels good, and we use it for that sometimes. But for the business, for Mr. Zuckerberg, for all of the other social media companies, it's all about making money by having us doom scroll and stare at a screen. It's not free. You're paying with your time, your attention, and your data. You're giving everything you have in this last frontier, our attention, our focus. It's the last frontier that's left that is now being fracked. And it's affecting mental health when it comes to our kids. And again, we don't have all the time to go all the way into it tonight, but when we think of these three major chemicals in our brain, dopamine, GABA, and melatonin, they get completely imbalanced because of the way that social media works and the way the mindless scrolling and the notifications constantly are giving us these hits of dopamine. It's disrupting that process in our brain. So go back to what I said when I talked about students are missing, part of their brain is still growing. This is negatively impacting them the most because they're still developing, just like lack of sleep, just like using drugs, just like too much sugar. All of those things negatively affect the growth of the brain. Social media is really bad on it. And teens who spend about 3.5 hours a day on social media are known to have a higher risk of anxiety and depression. Like our guests that were speaking earlier, I go out and speak all the way down to now 4th grade. And I can stand in a room, this happens every time, of middle schoolers, say 7th graders, and say, how many of you know someone who has suffered from anxiety or depression that's your age? Every hand goes up, at least 99%. And then I say, what about somebody younger than you, like maybe in the 4th or 5th grade? And at least half the hands go up in the room. And I cannot believe that, thinking that there are that many kids suffering from anxiety and depression at such a young age. It's related to this. There's constant comparison, it's affecting self-esteem, it's disrupting their attention and making it hard to focus and learn. We have seen test scores continue to just drop every year, and we keep saying, why is it happening? It's related to this because kids can't deal with complex tasks anymore, they can't stay focused all the time because we're constantly switching our attention as much as possible. And also, on the physical side, the blue light is messing up sleep cycles. I hear people all the time, I'm so tired. I always ask kids, are y'all tired? And every hand in the room goes up. It's because they're on their phone before they go to bed. They're on their phone right when they get up in the morning. That's affecting the whole process of brain development and what's happening to them. There's less physical activity. We're starting to see higher risks of obesity as being a major issue. We have a group right now that is doing some focus groups with some of our students in the district about attendance, because our attendance rates have gotten less and less in the last couple of years. And the number one thing in the last 4 focus groups that they heard from kids is the kids said, I'd rather be at home on my phone. I just want to sit in my room. I don't want to go to the dance. I don't want to go to the game. I don't want to go to class. I want to just stare at this thing because it's so important to me. It's the most important thing in the world. And with that, eye strain, headaches, constant screen time. I found out the other day, and this is not a clinical term, so don't quote me on this, but my optometrist likes to use the word football eyes. He said, your eyes are like ovals. And I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, because you're looking down at a screen all the time. You're not resetting your eyes and looking up all the time, because I'm constantly on my phone. And so I've had to build in habits to get that blood circulation back and keep my eyes round instead of like a football. And then wellness, phones at night, like I said, less deep sleep, less energy, radically affecting our kids' mental health. Overuse linked to increased loneliness. It's a paradox now, right? We are over-connected. We're so connected that we feel alone a lot of the time. And I think about that going back to when I was a young person and I'm trying to develop in the world and I'm struggling to deal with the realities of puberty and life. I didn't have this thing to deal with, this juggernaut that our children are dealing with all of the time. And it's replacing face-to-face time. It's making weaker real-life friendships. I say this to my teacher friends all the time are teaching now. I considered myself a really good teacher and a veteran teacher. I don't know what it's like to teach this generation of kids. I've sat in meetings when I've presented to kids or on Zoom, and when I've seen a whole room of blank stares and nobody wanting to engage and connect, and that fear, it's tragic. And it takes time, the kids can come out of it, but that's where we're at right now. So, in 2024, our governor signed AB 3216, requiring school districts to adopt a policy limiting student smartphone use by July 1st of upcoming 2026. There's other states and other districts that have already done this. There's some early adopters to this work. It's already happening. There's some even in California, but they finally came out and said we're going to have a law about it. And so myself and some other folks in the district went to our district leadership and put a proposal together and said, we need to do this right. We need to make a plan that will work for our school. It's not going to be perfect. It may have to evolve over time, but we need to develop our policy. And we thought about two things in that. One, we needed to move fast. Urgency matters because this is a crisis. But at the same time, we needed to take our time in a way and be careful and engage and connect with people and have conversations and see what's already working, take an asset-based lens, and actually make something that's not just going to cause a fight between teachers and students in a classroom and tell students, well, phones are bad and they're terrible, and just create this constant dissonance and negative interactions all the time. So, we believe it's our duty to protect students from the harmful effects of excessive phone use and social media while they are in our care. That's our job. I would say as a parent, I wish that you told your kid they could never have social media. And sorry, any students see this, they're probably mad at me about it. My 9-year-old has never even looked at social media. It's not going to happen for, I don't know, till when. But in our schools, we can do something about it. We can do that as educators. So we went out over the last 18 months and put a lot of work together. We put together a safety work group of about 45 individuals and collaborators across the district that consisted of teachers, students, parents, administrators, district staff that had related jobs in the mental health world, counseling, some of our restorative justice folks, different people who deal with behavior interventions, and we got all these people together and we met monthly and we had conversations about what could this policy look like. We researched existing practices in pilot schools in LBUSD. We went out to the schools that were already doing some of this innovative work. We have a couple middle schools that are on year 3 of restricting phones, and they've had tremendous success. Instances of violence have radically dropped. Cyberbullying has dropped. They're seeing a better world at their schools. And so we wanted to know, what are they doing that works? So then also, we surveyed administrators. Some of you and families may have filled out our survey that we asked for perspective of families, and we surveyed our teachers to get their perspective. We looked at external models across the state, in other countries. We looked at what was working with those and what the current research was saying, and there's so much research out there on this. And then we developed a comprehensive education campaign, and we provided resources for staff and families that are just starting to go out now in the last couple months. If you have followed us on anything, you may have seen our new podcast, or we have social media posts that we don't post during the day, but that we do post about this information. We have a website now, and we're continuing to build out more resources for the community. And now we're starting to build partnerships with nonprofits and others to continue to address the lack of government regulations. For Long Beach Unified and our leadership to say we're going to stand up and be unified with others that are doing this work, like Mr. Lowenthal and other folks that are doing this work. So, on September 3rd, the Board of Education unanimously passed Board Policy 5131.8, reclaiming attention, limiting distractions, supporting wellness, student phone use, cyberbullying, and social media safety. And now the difference of our policy, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I have not seen another policy that is as comprehensive as ours in the sense that we took the phone restriction issue, cyberbullying, and social media and wrapped it in one policy because they're all interrelated and interconnected. Seen a lot of phone restriction policies that are good, but we wanted to deal with all of this together. And we got pushback from our leadership in the beginning. They said, this is like two different policies. What are you doing? And we had to explain how these technologies work and how app-based platforms work and how this is all one big problem. So here it is, and this is kind of hard to see from here, so I'll let you know what it is. But our policy here in Long Beach Unified that was passed on September 3rd, that goes district-wide into effect on January 26, 2026, so second semester, we identify not as phone, but as personal and or wearable electronic restrictions. Cell phones and smartphones, smart watches that communicate, earbuds, headphones that aren't related to school, that aren't provided by the teacher for a project, and cameras. And then the big one, the new one for us, is smart glasses, because if you've been paying attention lately, smart glasses are the new thing. Mr. Zuckerberg over at Facebook wants to make every one of us wearing a camera and a screen on our face instead of having to do this all the time, so it's even more addictive. And Apple, I just read an article, they're now getting into the game and pushing to actually work with that, so it's coming. And if you think of the privacy issues that's going to create for our kids and our staff, the fact that they don't even have to do this anymore to be addicted, it's just right here all the time, that will have devastating consequences on our society. So we wrapped all of those things in our policy. We wanted to get ahead of that glasses thing as well. So here's what it is. In early learning, through transitional kindergarten through 5th grade, and then also in middle school, it's off and away all day. You're allowed to have your phone. We legally cannot restrict you from possessing your phone, but off and away, not used in a bag, not in your pocket, completely put away. That also includes restrooms and work-based learning experiences or field trips that students go on. So during school, once they enter the gate in those grades, phone is off and away all day. In high school, we went a little more lenient than some other districts, and we had a long battle about this in our work group about how we were going to do this. And thinking of logistics and thinking what would work in our massive high schools, we went with high schools being off and away during instruction and during class. Not nutrition, not lunch, not when they're passing period. You could imagine some of our high schools that have 3,800 students walking around in the middle of the day. Who is going to ensure that all of those kids are not on their phone? It'd be great, but we're not there yet. And they also have restrictions in restrooms and then also while being on field trips as well. And some of you may know our restrooms, we've had instances of violence where students will schedule time to go fight each other or attack somebody and then film it so they can have clout and get on social media. If you saw some of these ridiculous TikTok challenges we had last couple years where people are ripping toilets off the walls and causing immense property damage, we wrote that into the policy as well to deal with. Now, there are some exceptions, and these are by law required exceptions, and they're important because they can affect certain student populations. And so, one, and this is because of California Education Code, this is the law. If we would have been against this, we would have been breaking the law. So the first one is in case of emergency or in response to perceived threat of danger. Kid can take the phone out of the bag and use it. When an administrator grants permission to the student to possess it for a specific reason. And I'm going to give you an example. Last year, we had a high school that I worked with that they had phone restrictions in several of their classes. One of their departments decided they were going to be unified and test this out. They were one of our research schools, and their principal was supporting them. And there was a young lady in one of the classes whose father was incarcerated. And they were going to have a conversation he was going to call. And so she worked it out with her parents and the teacher and the administrator to allow for when Dad called, that she could step out of class and appropriately have that conversation because she wasn't going to be able to. We are human beings. We're not widgets, right? We need to allow for some of those exceptions when those things happen. The third one is when a physician or a surgeon determines that the phone is necessary. So if there's an example, there are several kids, I think last time I heard around 40 or so students who have to test their blood sugar. And they have to wear a monitor that's connected to their phone that oftentimes their parents are actually monitoring as well because it can be a life or death situation. So that is allowed as well. And then the last one is when it's part of a required accommodation for an individualized education plan, or what you may know as an IEP or a 504 plan. And that it's specific to the disability, that the phone is used in a proper way, that it's written correctly into that individualized education plan only, and not to just be used haphazardly. So here's the second part. So we added into our policy strong language on cyberbullying and the inappropriate use of social media, so this is the second part of the policy, And we have not had a cyberbullying official policy in Long Beach Unified ever. We had a bullying policy that kind of meant cyberbullying as well. We wanted that language called out, and the board agreed with that. We also looked at misuse of other electronic devices, like misrepresenting yourself, pretending to be somebody else, different negative impacts that students might be using these platforms or apps to do. The other big one was about not filming and recording and photography. That's been a huge issue. Privacy issue for our teachers, privacy issue for our students. So now you are not allowed to film or record without consent, which gets real tricky because there are public and private spaces on a campus. And so under regular law sometimes, a space might not be considered private, and so kids were taking pictures and we couldn't do anything about it. So we put in a policy, so now it's a rule, in our district at least, and so it has to be followed. And then the big one was during fights, altercation, or criminal acts. This has been a nightmare, especially at our large high schools, where a fight will happen and every kid will flush. Talking about what Ed's powerful story and what he was sharing, here's another version, right, of using the phone to broadcast this violence all over the country or all over the world, really, on social media. That has to stop. And so we put that language in there. And then also impersonating, electronic misrepresentation, and then even inappropriate use of apps. I had a situation where I was working with a school, and I'd gone out to do some presentations, and I had 3 back-to-back, 3 periods. And in the first period I came in, and in the first maybe 15 minutes, the projector crashed. It was weird, it was uncomfortable, we had to adapt what we were doing. Then I went into the next class, and the projector crashed. And then I went into the next class, and the projector crashed. And it was because this group of kids had downloaded this app that they could use to damage the projector. And so we wrote specific language about that, of not damaging property, and affecting that as well. So, now is the big part. When Lee and I sat down, and this policy was written, and our work group celebrated, and we left the board meeting, a big sigh of relief that it happened, and we were so excited, we just looked at each other and went, now the real work begins. This is just passing a policy. And the number one thing, and if you've ever heard me speak before, you've heard me say this because I say it all the time, I had a dear colleague who was a public information officer years ago, retired, and he always used to say, we're an educational institution. The best thing we can do is educate our way out of problems. And so the education is key. That's why having our guests that we had tonight, that's why broadcasting this information, education is the number one thing. We can regulate all we want, and regulations are good and necessary, but they don't fully move the ball forward. And so we started with our staff. So we've developed this resource guide. This is an internal document for our staff, but you can kind of see the cover. That's because each school site has to develop a clear plan that outlines expectations for the appropriate use of these devices in alignment with our board policy, and the plans need to be reviewed annually and revised as needed to ensure they're effective and equitable. The thing is, the minimum requirements of the policy are what they are, and they need to be followed. But how that looks at a small school like Sato, how that looks at a large comprehensive school like Millikan, how that looks in an elementary school, could be very different when it comes to what is the sequence of intervention or discipline, what are the different processes that they need, what type of staff do they have, who's going to do what, right? So is it the teacher gives a warning, and then the next thing the teacher calls home, and then after that, maybe they're sent to their counselor who then does some kind of intervention. Then does it go to the administrator? What is the sequence of process that's going to work for that school? And so the schools are going to build those out. Some already have them. Some are doing that right now. And so some other pieces that are allowed, just so that you know, we have the minimum requirements that are required in the policy, but it does call out other things that could happen. And I want to share this so that when you find out what your school's policy are, you're not going to be surprised. And so here's some of the pieces. Loss of extracurricular access and activities, right? If a student is a repeat offender or there's an issue, that could be something that is used. Behavior support plan with student and family. We are allowed to search if there are issues related to violence and other negative things, and we do have a board policy on what are allowable search and seizure. Device check-in plan. I have a school right now that has a policy where if a student films a fight, then they make a contract with the parent, and that phone is checked in every single day for that rest of that year. That's not going to work everywhere, but it works very well for that school. Secure storage, hanging pouches, or locking cabinets. We're seeing this work. Wilson High School has kind of been an innovator in using the lock boxes, and they've had several teachers using them, and they've had a lot of success. And it's even been a benefit for students because they get to charge them. And so kids are like, I can charge my phone. And I was talking to a student who's a young man who lives all the way in Compton and takes 2 buses to get here. His phone is his lifeline. So knowing that he can come and charge his phone and it's safe and stored away while he's in class, he was all for it. It worked. So that worked for that school. Parent contact and conference should be part of everything. We have to keep engaging our parents and bringing them to the table when this happens. As a teacher, to me, that was a fundamental part of the effectiveness of my job. I called home when things were not so good. I called home when things were good because I wanted to have that bridge with the parents. And that will help this work. Confiscation is possible. It is legal. It can be used at certain times where maybe a student has to pick up their phone at the end of the day or a parent has to come in if it's a major issue. But schools need to decide all those specifics and sequences that's going to work for their school, review it annually, see what's working, change when it's not. And so here's our implementation timeline. Our early adopters and pilot schools, they've been moving. Like I said, we have several middle schools that are 3 years into this, going into their third year into this. Some are going into their second year. Cabrillo High School and Jordan are examples of two of our large high schools that have gone all in right in the fall. So they implemented, we've been working directly with them since August to get them going off the ground, and they're actually having some good results. Some of our other high schools are right now prepping and planning to launch even pre-January 26th, and then some are going to wait until that exact date. And then from there, the policy is really about helping students take back their attention. So schools feel like a place where they can learn and connect without constant interruption. I have a story I've told before of a teacher who is a 28-year veteran in our system. Very, very strong, effective teacher. And she went into her principal's office one day and said, I need you to ban phones or I quit. I can't do this anymore. My kids are disengaged. They don't want anything to do with me. They don't want to learn. They can't read full books. I'm done. I need you to do something about it. And at the time, the principal said, we're not quite ready to do a full policy right now. The district's working on that, but I'll back you if you communicate to the parents effectively, you're consistent about it, you let the kids know, and you work with students to understand the impact. And she did this along with another colleague of her, and they had fantastic results. And it actually started other teachers doing it after they did some professional development and training to support other teachers, and it's just been slowly growing. And each time I go out to talk to those teachers, I've talked to some of their colleagues that are now doing it, and I was talking to an art teacher the other day. I walk in, I go, so how's the phone thing working with all the phones in the lockbox? And she was like, best thing I ever did. And I said, that's pretty awesome. I said, well, who paid for the lockbox? She said, I paid for it, and I would have paid triple for it because it's changed the game in my classroom. It's absolutely fantastic. And so they're seeing those results. And that's what we can get back to, making what we call our classrooms attentional sanctuaries, the safe place where their brain isn't being rewired and fracked, the one part of their day, every period, if it's in a middle or high school, where they are off their phone. And that's going to lead to focus, it's going to lead to engagement, and they're going to thrive. It works. It works when we get kids off these devices and give them those breaks. So I'm going to leave you with two things. One, this is some stuff for our website. We just developed a LBSchools.net phone policy, and we're massively building it out. We're going to continue to build this website out probably for the next foreseeable future, because this situation's not going to change. You can access the actual policy if you want to read it. It kind of reads like VCR instructions. It's a little long, but if you want to check it out. Under that, there's a summary of the policy that's just a basic infographic that's a lot more digestible. We're starting a monthly newsletter. We have a ton of research and other resources that are coming out. And then we just launched the Reimagined podcast, which is a podcast solely focused on social media safety and issues with phones. We are into our third episode we just recorded, and we're going to continue to push those out over the coming years. You can find that at our YouTube channel or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also access it on the website. And then we are currently revising our social media safety guide that we wrote about 5 years ago because the world has changed so much. And so we're getting that finished right now. We also are going to provide that fully in Spanish. So there's a Spanish language version as well to make sure we're supporting access to a lot more of our community. So you can check that out. Those resources are all there. And then I'm going to leave this up. I'm going to be hanging out here for a little bit. I know it's late, but if anybody has any pressing questions, other than this big view, happy to have a conversation with you. But if you scan this QR code, or if you're not a QR code person, if you just go to lbschools.net/device policy, there is a Google form. You can ask any other specific questions you have. We are building out a frequently asked questions document, or what people call an FAQ, and we already have a ton on it. It's on our website, but we're going to continue to evolve and build that out. And then also, hearing your questions also helps us in supporting our sites as they develop their plans. I want to thank you all so much for staying late on a Monday night. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope that you found tonight engaging and supportive in supporting your kids.
Chris, for the presentation. You did. It was very informative. Very nice. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out. Like Chris said, it's just such an important thing to get this out to the public, to educate. Education was such a big part of this policy. The regulation, of course, was one part of it, but really moving the needle on this is really about making sure everybody knows why we're doing it, right? The education part of it. And we really think that this will make some waves. It'll be great. So thank you all for coming. Chris will be up here answering questions if you would like to ask him. Other than that, have a great evening. Go Dodgers, and we'll see you all at some other time. Thank you very much.